The wheels of the stagecoach groaned against the frozen ruts as it lurched to a stop at Dry Creek Station. Through the frost-etched glass, Lillian McGrath caught her first glimpse of her new life. A handful of weather-beaten buildings huddled together against the Wyoming wind like cattle seeking shelter. The February blizzard had come early, fierce and unforgiving. So had she, unexpected, unwelcome, and alone. "End of the line, miss," the driver called, his voice muffled by the scarf around his face. "Best hurry inside before this storm gets its teeth in ya." Lillian clutched her carpet bag and the letter that had brought her all the way from Philadelphia, a proposal from a rancher named Colton Hayes. His words were plain, his offer honest, a wife for a home, partnership for survival. No poetry, no promises, and that had felt like salvation to a woman tired of being judged by her looks instead of her worth. The wind hit her like a wall when she stepped down. Ice stung her cheeks. Her wool dress was no match for the cold. She expected harsh weather, but not this, not the kind that bit through bone. A small crowd had gathered despite the storm. Faces red from wind and curiosity turned toward her. Their expressions shifted. First interest, then something meaner. "That's her," a woman's sharp voice cut through the snow. "Lord have mercy. Colton must be desperate as a dog in drought." Lillian didn't know it yet, but that was Sadie Donovan, the banker's wife and self-appointed ruler of Dry Creek society. Beside her stood the town marshal, Virgil Tate, his badge glinting under gray light. Maybe Hayes figured a woman built like a plow horse would be handy on a ranch. Tate drawled. Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and cutting as the wind. Lillian's grip tightened on her bag. She had come 2,000 miles to escape such words, only to meet them again at journey's end. Then she saw him. Colton Hayes stood apart from the others, tall and still, the storm swirling around him. He wore a long duster that whipped in the wind, and a wide-brimmed hat rimed with frost. His face was weathered, strong, marked by sun and sorrow. He wasn't handsome by city standards, but he looked solid, like the land itself. Unyielding and real. Their eyes met across the snow-swept platform. Lillian searched his face for disgust or disappointment, found only quiet steadiness. Without a word, he moved toward her. When he reached her side, he shrugged off his heavy coat and placed it around her shoulders, the wool still warm from his body. The gesture was simple, practical, but it felt like mercy. "Miss McGrath," he said, voice rough as gravel, "we should get inside." He didn't comment on her looks, didn't apologize for the townsfolk, just took her carpet bag with one hand and guided her toward the station door with the other. His touch was light, proper, yet it burned through her sleeves. Inside, a pot-bellied stove glowed faintly. An older man straightened from beside it. "Jed Crow," he said with a kindly smile, "neighbor of Colton's, got the buckboard ready whenever you are." Colton nodded. "Appreciated, Jed." Quote. Before Lillian could thank him, the door banged open again, and Marshal Tate strode in, cold air and mockery trailing him. "Hayes," he said, "you sure you want to go through with this? Judge'll be home in bed by now. Wouldn't blame you for changing your mind." Colton's jaw tightened. "Judge is expectin'. Us?" Tate smirked. "Wonder what your late wife would think. You tradin', delicate for sturdier stock?" "That's enough," Colton said quietly. Something dangerous flashed in his gray eyes. The room went still. Lillian stood frozen, the words, "late wife," echoing inside her. The letter hadn't mentioned another woman. Jed stepped forward. "Come on now, let's get to the church before the weather locks us in for good." The ride to the church was bitter. Snow drove sideways. The wind howled through every crack in the wagon. Lillian huddled in Colton's coat, her fingers numb, her heart heavy. He sat beside her, reins steady, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Not a word passed between them. The church stood lonely on a rise above town, its steeple barely visible through the white curtain. Inside, Judge Thornton, thin as a fence rail, rushed through the vows while Jed and his wife Martha stood witness. Lillian's mind swirled. She'd imagined many versions of her wedding, none like this. Hurried words, a stranger's hand, the storm shrieking outside. When the time came, Colton's "I do" was barely audible. His kiss landed on her forehead, a touch as cold and fleeting as falling snow. "Well then," the judge said briskly, "by the power vested in me, your man and wife, may God bless your union." Outside, the storm had worsened. The short walk to Colton's wagon felt endless. Sadie Donovan's carriage rolled past, her voice slicing through the wind. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hayes. I do hope your new home suits your station." Colton's hands tightened on the reins, but he said nothing. Lillian swallowed her humiliation as the wagon rolled away, townsfolk peering from windows, their eyes full of judgment. The journey to the ranch was long and silent. Lillian stole glances at her new husband. His face was set, unreadable, a man carved from quiet suffering. She wondered what ghosts lived behind those gray eyes. When they crested the final ridge, she saw it, a sturdy two-story house, barn and corrals half buried in snow. Smoke curled from the chimney, a thin promise of warmth. "Welcome home," Colton said simply. "Home." The word felt strange on her tongue. She clutched his coat tighter and wondered if she'd traded one kind of loneliness for another. Behind them, the snow kept falling, covering their tracks until it was as if they had never passed that way at all. The rooster's crow broke the gray light of dawn, but Lillian was already awake, staring at the ceiling of the small bedroom Colton had given her. Her own room, he'd said that first night, showing it to her with the same calm courtesy he might show a guest house to a stranger. A week had passed since the wedding. A week of quiet meals, colder nights, and questions she didn't dare ask. She dressed quickly, breath forming clouds in the cold room. Downstairs, Colton was already at the stove, the smell of coffee filling the air. His broad back was to her, shoulders tense beneath his shirt. "Morning," she said softly. He nodded without turning. "Coffee's on, biscuits in the tin." That was how it always went. Sparse words over simple meals, then out into the endless white to tend the stock. Lillian had thrown herself into the work, desperate to prove useful, to earn her place. But every effort seemed to remind him of what she wasn't. Yesterday she'd fought the frozen pump handle until her hands bled, only for him to wordlessly take over. The day before, she'd torn her skirt trying to climb a fence he cleared in one stride. "I can help with the milking," she offered now, reaching for her shawl. "No need," he said, grabbing his gloves. "Almost done." Always no need, always the wall of politeness that kept her out. Before she could reply, a knock rattled the door. When Colton opened it, the wind blew in Jed Crow, snow dusting his hat and beard. "Mornin', folks," Jed said, stamping his boots. "Colton, that red heifer's looking poorly. Thought you might want to take a look." Quote. Colton was already pulling on his coat. "The red one? That's her first calf? I'll come." Lillian grabbed her shawl. "I'll help." Both men turned, surprised. "I may not know much about cattle," she said, lifting her chin, "but I can follow directions. I've got 2 good hands." Jed smiled. "Course you do, Mrs. Hayes. Many hands make light work." Colton hesitated, then nodded once. "Bundle up warm." The wind bit through every layer as they trudged through knee-deep snow to the pasture. The heifer lay on her side, breath steaming in quick bursts, eyes rolling white. Colton knelt beside her, voice gentle despite the cold. "She's trying to calve." Too early, and the calves turned wrong. For an hour, Lillian worked beside them. When Colton needed someone to hold the heifer's head, she knelt in the snow without complaint. When he called for clean rags, she ran to the house and back, skirts heavy with frost. When the calf finally slid into the world, weak but alive, she was the one who wrapped it in a blanket Jed fetched, rubbing warmth into its small body. "You did good," Jed said with a grin. "Real good. Not many city women stick it out." Lillian smiled shyly, cheeks burning despite the cold. She turned toward Colton, hoping for a word, a look, something. But he was already checking the mother cow, face set in that same unreadable calm. Later, as they walked back, Jed fell into step beside her. "Don't let him fool ya," he said quietly. "Colton sees more than he lets on. You noticed how gentle his hands were with that cow?" "Yes. A man who's kind with animals usually carries hurt of his own. You watch his hands, Mrs. Hayes. They'll tell you stories his mouth won't." That afternoon, while Colton worked in the barn, she did just that. She stood at the doorway, unseen, watching his large hands move with patient care, testing leather, threading needles, tightening harness straps. Hands built for labor, yet careful as a craftsman's. Gentle hands, she thought. Lonely hands. That evening, silence filled the kitchen like smoke. She cleared the dishes while he stared into the fire. It was always this way, quiet so deep it pressed against her ribs. Then the sound of hoofbeats shattered it. Several riders approached fast. Colton tensed, reaching for the rifle by the door. "Stay inside," he said. But Lillian followed him anyway, unwilling to hide. The wind carried laughter, sharp and mocking. Sadie Donovan's voice cut through it, bright and cruel. "Well, now, if it isn't the happy couple," she called from her carriage. Behind her, Marshall Tate and two others grinned like jackals. "Evenin', Marshall," Colton said evenly. "Bit late for social calls." "Oh, we were just passing by," Sadie said, feigning innocence. "Wanted to see how our dear Mrs. Hayes is settling in. The ladies in town are simply concerned. Such a change from city life." "I'm settling in fine," Lillian said, forcing her voice steady. "Are you?" Sadie's eyes flicked over Lillian's work-stained dress. "You look rather weathered already. Ranch life doesn't suit everyone." "Poor Ellen." "That's enough." Colton's voice was quiet but dangerous. "You've had your look. Time to go." Tate chuckled. "No need for hostility, Hayes. We're just being neighborly. Though I wonder if your new wife knows what kind of man she's married. A man who lets his first." I said enough. Colton's voice cracked like a whip. Without thinking, Lillian stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes has been nothing but kind and decent to me," she said clearly. "And I'll thank you not to speak ill of him or his late wife on his own land." The silence that followed was thick as molasses. Sadie's painted mouth opened and closed before she finally sniffed. "Well, I suppose we know where your loyalties lie." She snapped the reins, and her carriage rolled away. Colton stood motionless on the porch, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Lillian waited, hoping he'd say something. Anything. That her defense had meant something. Instead, he said only, "You should have stayed inside." He walked past her into the house. The door closed softly behind him. The rejection stung worse than the cold. She stood on the porch until her hands went numb, her breath clouding in the moonlight. Just as she turned to go inside, she heard his voice, low, rough, from the doorway. "Thank you." Two small words, barely more than a whisper, but they landed deep. It wasn't much, just a pebble thrown against a fortress wall, but it was something. The March wind screamed across the Wyoming plains, rattling the windows of the Hayes Ranch. Inside, Lillian kneaded bread with quick, angry movements. 3 weeks had passed since that night on the porch when Colton had thanked her, 3 weeks of silence, thick as fog. Since then, he'd grown even quieter, throwing himself into work from dawn to dark. He'd built fences, fixed the roof, mended saddles. Anything to stay busy, anything to keep from talking. Lillian had stopped trying to fill the silence. She spoke only when necessary, her words falling into the emptiness between them like stones into a well. She'd thought marriage meant partnership. Instead, it felt like being a guest in her own home. That afternoon, she walked the fence line alone, her shawl pulled tight. The snow was melting, the earth soft beneath her boots. Spring was coming, but she couldn't feel its promise. Only the ache of something unfinished, unlived. Voices carried from the barn. Colton and Jed. She stepped closer, unseen. "Don't know what I was thinking," Colton said, his tone low. "Bringin' her here. She deserves better than a man who's got nothing left to give." Jed sighed. "That's horse nonsense and you know it. You just scared is all." "It ain't fair to her," Colton said quietly. Every day she's here trying so hard, and all I can think is how I'm failing her, just like I failed Ellen." The words hit Lillian like a bullet. She stumbled back from the barn, tears burning her eyes. He regretted it. He regretted marrying her. That night she could hardly swallow her supper. Colton noticed, but didn't ask. When he retired to his study, she packed her carpet bag in silence. Better to go before he asked her to. She sat by the cold fire till dawn, the packed bag at her feet. But before the sun rose, the wind began to howl. Fierce and sudden. A blizzard, fast and mean as a wolf pack. She'd have to wait for it to pass. Then footsteps. She turned. Colton stood in the doorway, eyes flicking from her face to the bag beside her chair. "Planning on going somewhere?" She swallowed hard. "When the storm clears. I heard you talking to Jed. You don't have to say it. I understand." His brow furrowed. "Understand what?" "That you don't want me here. That this," she gestured weakly toward the house, "was a mistake." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind battering the windows. Then he said, "Storm like this'll last days. You'd best unpack." He turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Stock'll need extra feed. Can't leave 'em to freeze." "You can't go out there in this." "Done it before." He pulled on his coat and scarf. "Keep the fire going." And then he was gone, swallowed by the white. Lillian stood frozen. He'd walked into a killing storm, and she was sitting here doing nothing. Without thinking, she threw on her coat and stepped into the blizzard. The cold hit her like a slap. Wind shoved her sideways. Snow blinded her. She couldn't see the barn, couldn't see anything but swirling white. "Colton!" she shouted, but the wind tore her voice away. She stumbled forward, half crawling, half walking. Her feet tangled in something, and she fell hard. Snow filled her mouth and nose. When she looked up, she saw only emptiness. The house was gone. The world was gone. Then, a shadow, a hand. Strong fingers gripped her arm, pulling her up. "Lillian!" He lifted her, holding her against his chest as he fought his way toward the barn. The doors slammed behind them. Inside, horses snorted and stamped, the air thick with steam. "What in God's name were you thinking?" His calm was gone. His voice shook. "You could have died out there." "You were out there," she shot back. "I couldn't just sit here while you—" He grabbed her shoulders, eyes blazing. "Minutes out there, Lillian, minutes, and you'd have been gone." Her tears came hot and fast. "I was leaving because I thought you didn't want me." "What?" "I heard you say life wasn't what you dreamed, that I was a burden you regretted." "No." His hands loosened but didn't let go. "No, that's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He exhaled, the sound rough and broken. "I meant I'm not what you deserve. You came here expecting a husband, and I gave you a ghost." She stared at him, breath-catching. "Tell me about her, about Ellen." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't. Then his shoulders sagged. "She was delicate," he said softly. "Beautiful, kind, but not built for this life." She tried. Lord knows she did. But the winters, the loneliness, it wore her down. Then the fever came through. Took her in 3 days. The doctor said it wouldn't have mattered where we lived, but I know better. I brought her here, to this hard land. I buried her out back under the cottonwood. Silence filled the barn, only the horses, breathing, and the distant roar of the storm. I told myself I'd never put another woman through this, he went on. Then your letter came. Practical, honest. Thought maybe I could give you a home without killing you with it. But you were so much more than I expected. Strong, brave. You stood up to Sadie that first night, and I realized I'd fail you too, same as before. She stepped closer, voice trembling but sure. "You haven't failed me, Colton. You gave me warmth when I was freezing, work when I was useless, safety when I had none. You came into that storm for me." He shook his head. "I couldn't lose you, Lillian. Not again. He stopped, words choking. "Then don't lose me," she said, reaching for him. "Don't hide from me anymore." He looked at her then. Really looked. His hand lifted, tracing the tear on her cheek. "You're not fading," he murmured. "You belong here. You always did." "Then show me," she whispered. "Show me I'm not alone." He drew her into his arms, holding her like a man who'd been starving for years. The storm howled outside, but inside the barn there was only warmth, the kind born from truth finally spoken. Later, as they walked back to the house, a rope tied between barn and porch to guide them through the blinding snow, his hand never left hers. Inside, by the fire, he turned to her. "I don't have fancy words," he said quietly, "but I can promise this. No more walls, no more ghosts between us." She nodded, tears glistening. "That's all I ever wanted." And for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, she felt what the word home truly meant.